Hi, my name's Alan Smith with Alan Smith Pool Plastering here in Orange, California. Many of our customers ask us, when is it time to replaster a pool? And they want to know some of the causes and symptoms of a failing pool surface. And so we came up with the top 10 reasons why a pool needs to be resurfaced, and I'd like to kind of go through each one and review them with you here, starting with number one. The number one complaint or problem that we see when we're out estimating pools for replaster is a symptom called spalling, or peeling and flaking. That's when a very thin layer of pool plaster is peeling off. Very often it's the steps of a pool or spa on the outside edges and down to the floor. And it's maybe the thickness of a playing card. And what's happened over the years, the pool water is dissolved out a very soluble calcium compound called calcium hydroxide out of that surface, and it starts to lift and peel and spall off. Once this happens, it's not reversible, and a few little spots here or there you can maybe sand around them, but once the pool starts to do that throughout, it is typically time to resurface and replaster, and the pool surface has seen its life. The second biggest phenomenon we see is surface stains. And surface stains, there's a lot of different kinds. The two most that we see are either calcium and salts, calcium salt being predominantly the same thing, and copper scaling or copper staining. And this discolors the pool and turns it a blue-gray discoloration or a very rough crystal-like deposit. And this is very unsightly, and if it becomes too deep, you can acid wash it off. When it just starts, you can do a very light wash, acid wash, and clean that off the surface. But once it becomes too embedded, the heavy acid washes usually destroy the plaster, and then it's time for another resurface. The next biggest claim for needing a resurface is the roughness of the pool. Very often you'll notice that your kids' toes might become very raw or bloodied very quickly, and that's because over time the pool water, which contains acids of different kinds, will slowly dissolve the plaster and roughen it up, or it's had a lot of acid washes, or you have a lot of very heavy calcium deposits that roughen up the surface and becomes basically so rough it's very uncomfortable for the bather, and then it's time to either drain, acid wash, and sand and polish, or to resurface if it becomes too bad. Another one of the problems we see is that on older pools that have been drained and acid washed or left empty for periods of time, you have little craze cracking or check cracking, hairline cracking throughout the pool surface, or eggshell cracking. Those have always been in your plaster. It's been almost impossible to see. That's a natural occurrence of the hydration process of any Portland cement. But when pools are left empty, they have a tendency to open up or get larger, these cracks, and become very noticeable. Also, if the water becomes extremely aggressive, it will eat out calcium compounds that are around these check cracks and highlight them, and they become much more visible. When these things start to happen, there is no turning back. If you do want to get rid of it, you do have to resurface the pool. The other problem we see a lot is on colored pool finishes, like a colored plaster job or colored quartz job. Very often the color is being lost, and that looks very streaky, spotted, where that white, blue, or black color is starting to get a lot of white spots or white streaks. And that is basically the color is being leached out or faded out. Very often you'll see that on the top step of a pool. If you have a floating chlorinator, goes and sits there, that area will become white very quickly with the pigments being leached out by those very strong chemicals. The cyanuric acids will take those out. And so that's another big one that we seem to run into a lot on these colored finishes. It's, if you like the colored look of the darker water, we obviously would highly recommend you put a pebble finish or some type of a exposed aggregate pool finish, which the rocks themselves don't lose the color. One of the other big problems we see are structural cracks in pools, and that's where the gunite structure itself is starting to break or crack, because a lot of times they're on hillsides, sometimes not, but very often on hillsides. The pool is shifted or moved, and then we have a structural crack, and you could have leaking, maybe not. But when these cracks occur, they requires quite a bit of repair work, either epoxy injection with steel staples, or physically remove some of the areas of the gunite and steel and reshoot and replace. And obviously when this happens, then you have to resurface it to cover all those repair areas. The next one that you see very often is rust stains. And these are large rust stains. It's typically from the reinforcing steel in the gunite that's oxidizing and bleeding out. Very often starts out as maybe the size of an eraser or a walnut, and it can grow into a very large oxidized stain that kind of bleeds all over the plaster. You can have 1, 2, 3, I've seen as many as 20, 30 stains in a pool. They have to be removed. The steel reinforcing that's rusting has to be cut out. If there's too many of them, then you have to maybe tie a new steel grid in the pool and to reinforce it. And this is very often a case when resurfacing a pool, more work might have to be done to fix that. Also, it could be a little piece of tie wire. That's the wire that ties the reinforcing steel together at intersections to hold it together. A little piece might be curled up too close to the surface and that create a small rust area. That's a much more repairable area. But if you do have a single or maybe 2 rust spots, it could be cut out and patched, or possibly even a tile mosaic put over it, like a big starfish or a stingray or a dolphin over that rust area so it doesn't look like a patch. Another one we see is on pebble finishes, where you might have a loss of pebbles or a lot of pebbles are falling out. This usually happens for a couple of reasons. Either the installer, what we call, is overwashed it. They wash too much of the cement out from around the pebble, so they're barely hanging on to some cement. Or if a normal pebble job was acid washed too many times and dissolved the cement out from around the stones, that the stones start to release and become dislodged. Also, if you have a very, very aggressive water chemistry, it can leach out the pigment from around the stones. And if you see a floating chlorinator on the top step of a pebble job, you can see stones become dislodged under that floater, or at least the pigment around that become discolored. Once this all happens, there is no repair. Either you live with it or you resurface it. And last, what we see is a lot of pools, the customers have decided to take a less expensive option in resurfacing and put on a coat of pool paint or fiberglass overlay. These typically don't last more than a few years, especially the paint, and they have a tendency to oxidize and chalk up and cloud up the water, and they come off. And the best is to remove that paint and remove the plaster and to resurface it. Or if it's fiberglass and it's delaminating, very often those will just simply peel away, or the gel coats will oxidize. We simply remove all that off down to the base plaster, and the plaster will come off itself underneath that for a good prep method, and we put a new plaster or a pebble finish on it. These are the big reasons that we resurface. Hopefully that's been helpful in helping you identify some of these. If you have any questions, feel free to call Alan Smith Pools. Thank you.